Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to begin an HTML document and what elements and other parts of code are required for every HTML document, as well as how to get started with the most commonly used elements. So before we jump into coding, we first want to talk about how the browser gets the HTML document and then how it reads it. So we've already learned that we have a server, and a server is where the files to your website are going to be stored once you're ready for your site to go live online. In this class, we're never going to go live with any of our documents. So just keep in mind, for us, our class folder is working as our folder on the server. So that server is going to serve up those files when a browser requests them. And you request them by typing in the URL for a website. The browser then goes and gets the files. The very first file it's going to look for is that index.html. Again, if it doesn't see it, it doesn't find it, it returns an error. So you always got to make sure that first document is titled index.html. Each page of a website is a different HTML document. So we're starting out just creating one HTML document, which means we're just creating a web page that has one page. And that's going to be our main page, so we're only going to have one file titled index.html. So when the server serves up index.html to the browser is going to begin at the very top of that document, top left, and work its way down. So the code needs to be in order to a certain extent. So, very first thing that we're going to add to our HTML document is the doctype declaration. Doctype declaration lets the browser know what type of document the browser has. So let's go ahead and add that in to an HTML document. So I'm over here in brackets, and under my working files I have actually two indexes just to show you this demo. Keep in mind, your files should never have more than the one index, otherwise it could confuse the browser. I have two because I'm going to demo on one, but I want to also show you a complete finished file on the other. So here's my index.html. I'm at the top of that HTML file. I'm going to add my doctype declaration. So I'm going to open angle bracket, doctype, all capital letters, exclamation mark, space, HTML, all lowercase, and then close angle bracket. Notice that brackets is doing something weird for me. It added a closing doctype, which there is none. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete that out. Then I'm going to hit return. Keep in mind, hitting return doesn't matter. So the computer only recognizes one space. Otherwise, you have to use code to create the space that you want on your website. So hitting the spacebar more than once or hitting return, visually in my document, that helps me, but it doesn't directly translate to what you will see on the website. Also, the code, as long as it's coded properly, you'll never see that code on the website, you just see the result of that code as it pertains to the content of your website. So we've just added doctype to our document, but if we opened this page in a browser, we would still see nothing, and I'll show you that. So in brackets, we have what's called live view. Over in the far right, we have this lightning bolt icon. If I double click that and I have Chrome installed, it will open up a live view of my document. Keep in mind, it's not perfect yet. This is open source free software, so sometimes there's a bit of a glitch. If you don't have Chrome installed and you want to use Live View, you'll need to go ahead and install it. If you can't, for some reason, that's no problem. Later, I will show you how you can preview your files just by opening them in a browser. For now, though, let's go ahead and take a look at our live preview. We don't see anything yet. It's because so far we don't have any content, we just are adding the code. All right, so back over to our list. After the doc type declaration, the very next group of elements you want to add are what are called skeletal tags. These skeletal tags are going to build the skeleton of your document. We're building the structure of our document. These tags you will have in every single HTML document. So first we have our HTML tag. This is going to say that the HTML code now begins. The doc type declaration told the browser this is an HTML document, but the HTML tag says, okay, now the HTML code begins. Once the HTML code begins, you now have your oldest ancestor. All the other elements are going to be nested inside that HTML element. Before we move over and begin to add this to our code, let's just walk through the rest of these and then we'll go over and add them all together. So next we have the head. The head of the document you can think of as sort of the head on a body. This is going to house all of the metadata for your website. The code in the head won't actually be seen in the viewport of your website. There are some things that you add that could be seen in the Chrome. So remember, the Chrome is the bars at the top, the scroll bars, all of that outside and surrounding your viewport, but isn't actually part of the viewport. So when I say viewport, that's different. So what's in the head will never be seen in the viewport on your website. After the head, you then have the body. The head and the body are siblings, and they are children of HTML. So they are both nested inside HTML, but they are separate from each other. The body is going to hold everything that you want to add into the viewport on your website. So everything you want to see on your website needs to be inside that body element. So if the web page is really big, there's going to be a lot of code inside this body element. Inside the head element, you will have what's called the title. And the title, in order to not seem like a rookie, you're going to make sure you always add a title. That title, again, goes in the head of the document, but it is seen in the tab. So in the Chrome, in the tab, is where you'll find the title. If you don't add one, it's going to say untitled, and that doesn't look very good. So you want to always make sure that you're adding the title. All right, so let's go and add these skeletal tags to our document over in brackets. Okay, so before I start to add this in, let's take a look at what happened when I hit enter after the doc type declaration. It tabbed over automatically. This is just brackets trying to help you stay visually organized. Again, that space doesn't matter to the browser. All right, so next we add our HTML. Soon as I open angle bracket, I add HTML for my opening tag. When I close angle bracket, notice that it automatically created a closing HTML tag for me. You've got to pay attention to that, because if you didn't realize it created it for you and you just kept on going, you'd be creating multiple elements. And these skeletal elements, you should only have one of each throughout one HTML document. You'll never have more than one HTML element, more than one head element, more than one body element, or more than one title element in one HTML document. In each HTML document, you will have one of each, even though they're all part of the same website. But in this one HTML document, you should only ever have one of each of these. So I said HTML, this is the oldest ancestor. Everything else from now on is going to be nested inside the HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return a couple of times and give myself some space. And then I'm going to go back up into HTML and I'm going to tab over. I don't have to. I could code all in one long line. So remember that in here, when I'm hitting enter, in between elements, it doesn't matter. That space doesn't matter. So I've gone back in and I've hit tab and I'm going to go ahead and add the head. Again, it's doing some things for me. Inside the head is where I add my title. And inside here, I add whatever I want to show up in that tab of the tab. So now I'm adding content in there, and notice the color that everything is taking on. Your tags are going to be blue. The content is going to be black. Once we start to add in some attributes and some values, you'll see those have different colors as well. Just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and save this, Command S, and I'm going to jump over to my preview, and I'm going to go ahead and update or refresh my window in Chrome. Sometimes you'll have to do that, and sometimes you'll be able to just see it live happening. It kind of goes back and forth. So when I added that title, it didn't register over my live view, but as soon as I hit refresh, I now see what I typed here in the tab in the Chrome. So this is the title of my web page, not down here in the viewport. So keep that in mind. That title will always be in the head of the document. If I accidentally had that title, I'm going to just go ahead and do this. I'm going to select it and Command X on a Mac. When I say most of these keyboard shortcuts and all of that, sometimes they'll also work on Windows, but most of the time I'm working on a Mac, so what I'm saying is equivalent to a Mac. And I apologize that I can't do both all the time. Sometimes I will try and let you know. So keep in mind, if you're working on a Windows, you may need to look those up for yourself. All right, so I've taken that title. I hit Command X to take it away from the head, but also copy it. So it's sitting on my clipboard right now. Then I'm going to go after the closing head tag before I open the body. Remember, the head and the body are separate. They are siblings, which means they need to be separate. They are nested inside HTML. So the HTML is their parent element. They are the child or children of the HTML. So if I go here inside that body element and now add in the title, I went ahead and I saved it, and I'm going to go back over here to my preview and refresh. All right, so for now, we're only going to add the title into the head of the document, but keep in mind there will be other things that you could add into the head. Any metadata you want associated with that document. So we are not going to do any of that in this class. We just don't have enough time. But if you continue on, you'll begin to see things in the head like who the author is, a description of the website. You can add metadata from Facebook so that you can say, if anybody links to this document, I want you to show this image. Any of this kind of metadata could be added. For us, we're only going to add the title, but from now on, in every single HTML document that you create, be sure that you have that head element inside the HTML element and that you add the title element. And then outside of the head, we're now going to add the body. And again, everything that you want to see in the viewport of your website is going to be inside this body element. So I've given myself a bunch of room that I'm now going to go back up into and tab over right after that body element. All right, so those are the skeletal tags. Now we're going to move on to structural tags. So I'm going to bounce back over. Our structural tags can be categorized into main structural tags and kind of the others. That's not always the case, and I'll point that out here in just a minute, but for the most part, these main structural tags, you're always going to have them, and you're usually only going to have one of each. So what are these main structural elements? Let's take a quick look at another website. Okay, so here we are, weather.com. It is pretty clearly broken up into different areas. Not all websites will be, but this one's pretty good. All right, so starting here at the top, I see these different bars of color. That signals separation in the code. So I see this blue here, and if I look over to the far right, I see some branding. I have the weather channel. It's small. Sometimes your branding will be huge. This one's relatively small. But that branding is going to be inside a structural element called the header. So the header, it's usually the very first thing that you visually see in the viewport. Not that comes in your HTML document. Remember, that's the doc type declaration. But on an actual web page in the viewport, the header is usually the very first thing you come to. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you might have a submenu above it. Sometimes you might have a search bar above it. Sometimes you might have some other different elements above it. But one thing that can really tell you what the header is that branding. The branding's always going to be in the header because the header is announcing what the web page is about. So here, the web page is about the Weather Channel. After the header, I'm going to skip past actually this blue line and this black line and jump down here to this larger blue area. This is our next larger structural or main structural element, and see how much of it there is all the way down here until you start to see this white. That's a different element. But all of this blue, everything that's in it is inside of the main element. So main is what has to do with just that page itself. The header is going to remain consistent across the entire website. So it's going to stay the same between each HTML document. And actually, once you've designed the header in one HTML document, after you create the other HTML documents, you can just copy and paste that code over into every single one because it's going to stay consistent. What's inside the main, however, is going to change between each HTML document or each page of a website. So the main is going to house a lot of code because it's going to house pretty much everything else that's on the website. Scrolling down a bit more, down here at the bottom after the blue we have this bar of kind of an off-white. This is a footer. We only have one footer on this website, but when you're out exploring websites, you might actually see more than one footer. So I mentioned before these larger or main structural elements, you usually only have one. Sometimes the footer breaks that rule, and this has become more of a trend recently. Back in the day, this never would have happened, but you might see more than one footer now. But the header, the main, and the footer, they're always going to be in that order. Header is always going to be at the top, main is always going to be next, footer's always going to be at the bottom. The next elements that we're going to talk about, you might see more than one in a HTML document, and you might see them moved around. They don't particularly follow a certain order, but header, main, and footer do. One thing to think about is with header. So far, we've had head, and now we have header. It's very important not to get those mixed up. They're two different things. The head is a skeletal element. You have to have that head in there. The header is a structural element. It's a main structural element, but it's a structural element found inside the body. Later, we're going to learn about headings. So we have head, header, and headings. Again, very important. Don't get any of those mixed up. They sound very similar, and I see it happen all the time. All right, so we'll jump back to this example a little bit later, but for now, let's go ahead and add those into our code. So I'm going to come back over here, and all three of these go inside the body. So inside the body here, I'm going to go ahead and start out with the first, which is header. I'm going to come here and hit return. Next we have main. After main, I'm going to go ahead and add in a footer. Let me actually take this footer away really quick. I want to point something out. So as you're typing, let me get to a point here. All right, so I've just typed that one open angle bracket. Notice that the code below it turned red. That's letting you know if you stopped right now, your code would be wrong. And that's because I've added an open angle bracket but nothing after it. So it sees an element is opening but never closes, so it breaks everything after it. Anytime you see that red, if you're finished coding, you need to take care of that problem or that issue before you move on to the next thing. However, if you see it now, like I do, finish what you're doing. Don't let that fool you. Once you're finished, it should go back to the normal color. If it doesn't, that means you made an error, and you do need to figure out what that error is. So it's an indication that you've made an error, but it's not going to exactly tell you what it is. But you can always think about, all right, I just made that error. The error is going to be right above the red. It's not going to be way above the red, because if there was an error up there, all the code below it would be red. So you're going to go to that top of the red and start to make your way back. So in this case, I see, oh, I have this open angle bracket. That's an error. I need to finish it or delete. If I just even delete that angle bracket, I've taken care of that error. Now my code all works. But as soon as I add that angle bracket in, I get the red again, but if I just continue, I'll be fine. So I add in my footer, the red disappears. I can see now my code is good. So this is the code for a basic web page. I have my doc type declaration. I have my skeletal tags, and I have my main structural tags. Right here, every single HTML document is going to have this. So if you are going to create a brand new HTML document, you can jump right in and add this every single time. So keep that in mind. That's going to be on a quiz later. Okay, so just to review and also kind of point out how brackets is going to help you, I'm going to come back up here and click once on HTML. Basically, I'm placing my cursor inside HTML. Notice it highlighted the opening HTML tag and the closing HTML tag. This helps you to see your nesting. It helps you to see how you're building your document tree. So the HTML element should be the oldest ancestor. Remember, we're not thinking about the doc type declaration. Once we've added that in and we've added it correctly, it is what it is. HTML, everything else should be coded inside. Then inside the HTML, we have our skeleton. We have our head, When I click and add my cursor, it highlights the opening and closing of the head, and I can see inside the head I have my title. I see my opening and my closing. It's inside the head. Next, I have my body. My body's lined up with the head because they are siblings. But they're both still nested inside HTML. So now I have my body. Inside my body, I have my 3 main structural elements. It's going to be on the quiz. Those 3 main structural elements are header, main, and footer, in that order. Okay. So again, we've coded a basic web page. I'm going to go ahead and Command S to save that.